Good morning. Welcome to the 32nd Annual Eggs and Issues, hosted by the Spencer Chamber of Commerce. Today's forum is sponsored by Iowa Lakes Community College. I'm Sharifa Jones, Executive Director of the Spencer Chamber, and I will be your moderator today. I'd like to thank Spencer Municipal Utilities and KICD for live streaming, and Mediacom, who is recording for broadcasting. We will start today by having our guest legislators give a brief opening statement, and then I will begin to ask the legislators questions that have been submitted to the Chamber by area citizens. Please remember, the goal of this forum is to try and cover as many topics as possible in the time allowed. All questions will be shared with the legislators so that they may be followed up with in those who had asked those questions. Next, I'd like to thank our legislators for giving of their time today in this informational forum. I'd also like to extend condolences to the Raleigh family who recently lost a loved one. Let's start today with our opening statements. Today we have State Senator representing District 3, Lynn Evans, State Representative with District 6, Megan Jones, and State Representative with District 10, John Wills. With that, Representative Wills, we will begin with you in your opening statement.
See if I remember how to do this. I got it, I think. It's been a year, so, and she would have to start with me. We're into the second week of the legislative session, so there's not a whole lot to report. I can tell you that because I get to go first, I get to talk about maybe the hottest topics that we have heard about all summer. Property taxes, that's probably I would say all three of us would say that's a big topic, something that a lot of people when we were knocking doors or out and about have been talking about. And so I sit on Ways and Means in the House, and so that's one thing that we've already started talking about. What can we do? What should we do? What should we not do? You know, we have to understand that property taxes is a solely local tax that the schools, cities, counties, community hospitals, community colleges, those are the primary people who tax property tax. And so it is an issue, but when we get almost every door that we knock or almost every person that we talk to has talked to us about property tax all across the state, it is something that we have to take a look at and understand what we can do. We can change property tax the way it's done, or we can pay money to those local entities to offset some costs from the state coffers. Now, if we do that, then what we do is eventually, if you want gold-plated bricks on your sidewalks, the state will say, no, you're not going to do that. Well, if you want gold-plated bricks on your sidewalks here in Spencer, you should have gold-plated bricks on your sidewalks. The state shouldn't have to say that or shouldn't step in and tell you not to do that. And so that's where we're at right now in deciding how we should deal with property taxes and the different things that we should do. But it is something we're going to have to deal with because so many people came to us and talked to us about it. And so that's going to be a big issue, probably a long one that we're going to have to deal with. And may not get it done this year. It may be something that we have to go into next year with as well. Some things that I'm personally looking at, I do have a bill that gets rid of daylight savings time. That's a fun one. I have another fun one that makes the Iowa fish be the Iowa darter, which is another fun one. If you remember, I did that one last year, didn't make it, so we're trying again. And then I also have, on a serious note, I talked about this last year, but I have a bill that will require dads to pay pre-birth child support for the child that's not born. And that one kind of got stalled out last year a little bit, and so we're bringing it back and going to try that again. So those are some things I'm working on and looking forward to hear what your questions are, what your concerns are, and through what we will hear from today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Senator Lynn Evans.
Well, with, what do we have, eight days in session officially? You know, not a lot has hit the actual chambers yet. We're starting hard and heavy on subcommittees on some bills that have been dropped. committee work will begin in earnest starting this week when we get back in session. You've probably heard the governor made the announcement that the cell phone policy bill has dropped. I have not seen the ink on the paper yet. I've requested that bill, so I should see it on Monday when I get back, exactly what's on the paper there. I have some ideas on how that should be handled. I know a lot of school districts have already moved in that direction on their own, and I certainly wouldn't want to hinder any work that they've already been doing and what's working in their schools. So keeping that balance between maybe nudging those who have not gone down that road and working on that policy themselves is a good thing, but honoring the work of those who have already started down that path is something I want to maintain. Also, my committee assignment somewhat changed this year. I'm no longer on Health and Human Services. I always enjoyed the work on that, but I'm now Vice Chair of Government Oversight, and I'm Chair of the Education Committee. So they removed me from one of my committee assignments as a result, which is nice. Now, my clerk was not so excited about this because she did not sign on for extra work on some of these assignments, but looking forward to digging in this session, and we've got a few policy things coming down. Math, and how we're instructed math and current best practice in mathematics. We did some work on reading and reading instruction last year. We're going down a similar vein with mathematics instruction this year, and I'm looking forward to digging into that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Jones.
There we go. Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you to the Chamber and Iowa Lakes Community College for hosting the forum today. A lot has happened since we were here last. I don't think any of us, when we concluded Eggs and Issues last spring, would have ever thought about the predicament that we were going to be in on June 22nd. And subsequently, that has changed a lot of our work in the legislature. So I previously chaired the Administrative Rules Committee, and I jokingly would say that that was kind of the penalty committee because you're reading thousands and thousands of pages of absolutely dreadfully boring, awful material that probably shouldn't even exist for days on end, and then you sit and listen to people talk about this absolutely dreadful material that probably shouldn't even exist. In any case, I transitioned to the local government committee, and when the speaker asked me to chair the local government committee this session, I was like, I don't know how that fits, and then I figured it out, and it was because of the flood. And so he knew that this session was going to have to be very flood oriented for me in particular, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to chair the local government committee. As many of you know, I spent a few years working for Don Hemphill, who's the Spencer City attorney, and currently I'm an assistant county attorney in Buena Vista County. So I've got a little bit of experience with local government, but certainly my district needs someone who can help direct local government issues in their direction this session. I'll also be serving on the Ways and Means Committee, which is a taxation committee. When it comes to property taxes, as Representative Will said, that's going to be a really big conversation, and it's really going to impact my folks back home. I know a lot of you are worried about that, and you've expressed that to me. So we're going to work through those conversations, see where that ends up. But I'm glad that I'm on the local government and Ways and Means so that I can help be a part of both the policy side of that and the taxation side. I'll also be on state government, and then I'm on a new committee, a historic committee. We had the first committee in Iowa history on federal funds, and this is a really interesting look at all the federal money that is coming into the state and how we can better direct and leverage that money. So one of the first topics that what got brought up was the DOT. And the federal government has so many strings on the DOT and how we can better leverage funds, but also whether we need to leverage them at all, right? So we're going to take a deep dive into Iowa's access and ability to access federal funds through that committee and see if we can better direct that money elsewhere. And I also really appreciate being on that committee from a flood perspective too, because obviously there's a lot of federal impacts here. It was announced this week that Spencer Community Schools was appropriated $2 million from the federal government, specifically targeted at the elementary schools that were impacted in the flood. So that was a pretty exciting piece of legislation coming out of the federal government over the last week or so. And correct me if I'm wrong, they've already sent you that money? Is that right?
Received the federal portion of it, not the state.
Okay. Well, if you have any problems with that, let me know. Sorry, I don't mean to call you out, but while you were there, I thought I'd ask. So a lot of the first week of session is a lot of clapping. We're hearing a lot of speeches, and we're kind of figuring out the pathway forward for the legislative session. Opening day, we call to order, formally appoint the chief clerk, speaker pro tem, John Wills, and the speaker, the majority leader, lay out those positions. And then day 2 is the condition of the state address from Governor Reynolds. I think probably a lot of you saw or heard pieces of that from Tuesday night. The third day, we hear from Chief Justice Susie Christensen on the condition of the judiciary. And I think that is one of the most overlooked but pivotal speeches that we hear from in the legislature during session. She's worried. She is very worried. We have a critical lack of attorneys in Iowa, particularly in Northwest Iowa, and I see that in my other job every day. We're going to have to do something. People have a constitutional right to an attorney. We've all heard the Miranda warnings, right? But when those people don't exist, what do? Because you can't keep these folks in jail, but at the same time, you don't have anybody to serve them. So we're going to work on some of those issues, and I appreciate her passion and her concern, and the fact that she brought that to light, because it's going to be pretty scary, and at some point, the state's just going to get sued. Day 4, we heard from the condition of the National Guard. I so very much appreciate what the National Guard did for our community June 22nd and thereafter. I was actually rescued off of Lincoln School by a member of the National Guard and a few members of the Storm Lake Fire Department, and I so very much appreciate that they came to bat for our team, for our community. They were so fast and so quick on the response. And our boat driver, I said, "What does your day look like?" And he said, "Well, at 3 o'clock this morning, I was bailing water out of my house. I saved some people in Rock Rapids, and then I came here." And that hit, right? Like, he was so selfless that he just left whatever mess he had at home to come and get people in Spencer. So very much appreciate the work of the National Guard and what they're doing for Iowans. That Friday of the first week, they usually send us home on Fridays to try to swap out our dry cleaning and get to a few pancake breakfasts before they call us back in on Monday. This last week, week 2, was a little weird because we observed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, but then also it was Inauguration Day. There were a lot of members that went to the inauguration, so Tuesday was kind of a travel day for a lot of members, but Tuesday was particularly important for me and for the city of Spencer because we had a number of people from Spencer. Sharifa was one of them. Councilman Lauren Reed was there, and city manager Kevin Robinson came down, Steve Pick with SMU came down, and then also Kurt Strouth from the Iowa Lakes Corridor all came down to the Capitol. We did a presentation to some relevant committee chairs to talk about economic development needs in Spencer. Then I had the opportunity to introduce them on the House floor, and a lot of my colleagues pulled me aside after that and said that they were so very much appreciative that Spencer came, and that we're bringing a light to what happened during the flood. And they asked a lot of really good questions just from this crew being there. Then we presented to the local government committee, which I think opened up a lot of eyes about what all happened and how we can do better, but what we need and how the legislature can help. And then we capped off the day having a wonderful meeting with Speaker Grassley and Majority Leader Winchittle, again, following up on what the legislature can do to help Spencer and Northwest Iowa recover from this flood. So That's just kind of a recap of the last 2 weeks. It's been kind of a wild ride, but that's 'tis the season, right? So really excited that you all are here. Happy to take your questions. If you're not comfortable asking a question in public, feel free to email me, text me, whatever. I try to be very accessible to my folks back home, but I do appreciate you being here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Representative Jones. With that, we're going to go ahead and start with some questions. I would invite Bill Kirstein to the microphone, and Bill has a question just regarding kind of prioritizing your priorities for 2025. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, and welcome. Thank you for coming out today. You brought almost freezing temperatures here, and maybe it'll get better as we go along. That does not include the hot air that's in the room, but you know, it's out there. Excuse the hat, but I have a bad hair day, so this will help. And I was listening to the radio this morning, and they have a feature on Saturday mornings of different aspects of government, and it was on getting through the VA system when you have an application for benefits. It's almost impossible. And then there's some other ways that maybe can be done, but that just tells you we got a lot of work to do in all levels of government, whether it's federal, state, local. My question was your top 3 priorities for 2025. And I think you kind of got into that a bit, but I'm sure there are some that are more close to your heart than others, and some that, you know, the state needs to really address, and some that, you know, people say to you as you're coming in the door, why don't you promote this? But from your personal perspective, what are the top 3 things you want to see this legislature accomplish this year?
Great. Thank you, Bill. With that, Senator Evans.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Obviously, property taxes is going to be one of the big topics that we're not going to be able to avoid having a discussion on. I think it's going to take more than just this year. It may take the entire 2 years of the session to really get something on paper that's workable. So that's one of the priorities, although I don't get a set at the table. These 2 get a set directly at the table, make some of those decisions, and I get to give them input. And nod my head and all those good things. But my priorities changed a little bit this summer. Representative Jones mentioned about flood. And so we have worked together on a few bills that we're running in companion between the House and the Senate, and one is giving county supervisors the ability to address flood mitigation using what nature already gives us in wetlands and oxbows and those type of things. Now, if you really look in Iowa code, I would argue that they have a case they could make that they already have some of those authorities, but what the bill that we're presenting does, it actually clarifies that they have the authority to move forward, just like city governments can now. And I think that's an important one when you're looking down the road for the future on how we can maybe control some of these losses in the future. Another one is obviously school districts, not just Spencer and Cherokee and Rock Valley, but in southern Iowa where a few communities were hit with tornadoes that were very devastating, that it affects school districts. So a lot of times those parents, they'll move their children out of the school district with the intent of coming back at some point, but it affects school enrollment. There's a mechanism called budget guarantee. So when a school, and Representative Jones and I worked on this one as well together, when a school district loses school enrollment, they can apply for something called a budget guarantee, which brings their budget back up to whole from the previous year. Now it is a local tax. They do not have to levy the tax, but it gives them the spending authority, which is what drives school district budgets. We can get into that later if you'd like. So those communities that have been impacted by a natural disaster directly that affects their school enrollment, according to this bill, would be eligible to be on the budget guarantee for 2 years rather than 1. So knowing that oftentimes recovery takes more than just a year or a few months, it can go on for a couple of years. It gives some budget, relieves some budget pressure off of some of those school districts, and gives them the spending authority so they can move forward on continuing to educate our students. So those are a few things that I'm really focused on. And I mentioned mathematic instruction. I had an opportunity to visit with the governor a little bit this summer. about moving in that direction. We did some great things with reading instruction during the last year, finishing up last session. This year, starting to focus on mathematics instruction, trying to raise the student achievement level in reading and math across the state, and getting teachers the professional development and the resources that they need in the classroom to move in what we know is current best practice in reading and math instruction. So those are some of my big priorities this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Evans. And Representative Jones, what are your top 3 priorities?
Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you, Bill, for asking that question. So I'm trying to make my list, and then I keep scribbling things out and reordering them. So these just might not be in order. But first of all, flood. Obviously, that is something that we're going to need to work on. The City of Spencer provided me with a Christmas list. I asked them to, a Christmas list of ways that the legislature could be helpful, different pots of money that we could direct funds into. And I wanted that flexibility because if I can see an opening in one of these last-minute appropriations bills, I'm going to take it. So a lot of that is going to probably happen later. We'll have those opportunities, hopefully. But I want to get Spencer on everybody's radar so that the legislature and my colleagues are aware that we're going to need to do something for Spencer. Spencer has always done really well on its own, right? Rarely do I have to go to the legislature and ask for a direct appropriation for Spencer. Spencer is a community that we'll just fix that ourselves. We'll just take care of that. But this time, we're going to need some help. And so we have a list of ways that we can be helpful. And I know that we've already caught the attention of my colleagues. And actually, so very terrifying event this last week. So you never want to get called into the speaker's office, right? Because you're usually in trouble then. But this week, the speaker actually came to my desk, and I was like, oh boy, this is not good. When the speaker actually comes to your desk, and he's like, hey, I've got some questions about Spencer, and I've got some ideas about how we can help him. And I was like, oh, okay, we really struck a chord when we brought everybody in on Tuesday. So I know he's watching out for us, and I know his team and he are looking for ways to be helpful for Spencer, and certainly Northwest Iowa too. Second priority, and Senator Evans touched on this a little bit, but we need to be mindful of local control. And far too often, we see the legislature as the solution to a problem. But in many cases, the solution is on the local level. And so I think we need to be more concerned about not acting where we could. And I gave opening comments to my local government committee. I said, at some point, we're going to have to make sure that we are exercising self-restraint. Just because we have the power to do something doesn't mean that we have to impose this on our local governments, especially when we have so many local entities that are in flux right now with natural disasters. And it's not just Spencer. We've got Sioux Rapids. We've got Sioux County that's got that situation, and it got situations, and then also Greenfield was taken out with a tornado. So we need to be mindful of what we're doing on the state level, and if that takes away flexibility on the local level. So that's my number 2 concern, is making sure that we are mindful of what we're imposing on our local governments. And then third, it's been discussed, property taxes. Now, those 2 conversations kind of go together, right? What I have said multiple times about property taxes is that this, and Representative Will said this earlier, this is not our pig, this is not our farm. We do not set the property tax levels. That's not going to the state. But for some reason, this has become the legislature's problem. And so when people come to us with a problem, we try to fix it. We have tried to fix it 9, 10, 12 times over the last decade. I don't know well, we obviously haven't fixed it, but I don't know if our Band-Aids have helped. And so we're going to continue to have that conversation, see what can be done, if anything, at the state level to address property taxes. And so yeah, that's number 3. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Wells.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I've already talked about a couple. Property taxes, of course, that's one of the top 3. Pre-birth child support, that's another priority for me that I'm going to be working pretty hard on. And then the governor says it best, but she says, here in Iowa, we did Doge before it was cool. So the President Trump's Doge with Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, We've been doing that for years here in Iowa. Just 3 years ago, when we combined 37 departments into 16, we've already saved $200 million from just that. And you probably never even noticed that we shrunk our state government from 37 departments down to 16. Last year, we removed and eliminated some boards and commissions, and that's going to save it. We don't know the dollar amount yet on that one, but we've already saved some money there. We're looking at ways to make our state government smaller and smarter so that you receive the benefit of that through less property or less taxes, less regulation, and so forth. And so that's something that I think is kind of a priority. That's been a priority of mine for the entire time that I've been in the legislature. And so that's something that I think is still a priority because if we can make our government smaller but smarter, that it works for you, but at a less cost and a more an easier way of doing it, that's just going to benefit you. That's going to be a better government for you. I would say also flood mitigation, flood stuff is a big deal. And I will tell you, the better way for flood resistance is to start now and put conservation on the land. And I'm going to get into my day job a little bit. Up in Iowa Great Lakes, I protect the Iowa Great Lakes. I'm a conservation guy. And so we have for 30 years, been putting conservation on the ground in the Iowa Great Lakes watershed. I have, on the back of the napkin, looked at this year's flood compared to 1993, where we had water going over the road in Orleans. We didn't have water going over the road in Orleans this year. In fact, on the back of the napkin of my figuring, we reduced the flood in the Iowa Great Lakes by about a foot, which is a huge amount, by putting conservation on the ground. And so that's what needs to happen across the state of Iowa, is we need to just have some of these practices put on the ground through voluntary conservation that reduces the impact that those floodwaters have. The best time, of course, to do that is right now. I can't remember who said it, but the best time to plant a tree is now, even though you may not live under the shade of that tree, but the best time to do that is right now. And so we need to kind of change how we do things in the state of Iowa because these floods aren't going to stop. They've never stopped. There's been floods throughout all history of the state of Iowa. So we need to really look at those kind of things. So that's not really necessarily a priority, but it's something because we've been talking about it. I just wanted to bring up. And you know, local government officials will take their cue from you, just like we're taking our cue from you on property taxes. And so it's going to come. It's going to have to come from the bottom up, from the constituents to the local elected officials, in order for that pressure to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. Our next question comes from Troy Leininger regarding property tax reform. Perfect timing.
Good morning, and thanks again for making time to come out and see us. And I have seen you before the session, so I knew that was a hot topic. That's why I wrote it down. But I think you guys have kind of covered a lot of, where you're going to start. And again, I know it's a long conversation. It might take a few years to go. From our standpoint, we're in the rural part of the state, then continuing funding the homestead, ag land, family farm property tax credits would be something that we would like you to keep, as well as, changes maybe. The credits to exemptions might be something that we would not like to see on that when you guys get into that conversation. So maybe I'll transition to a little different topic and get you off of property taxes, which is another thing that we talked to you a little bit about before the session, would be like foreign animal disease. We've got the high path influenza and turkeys and chickens and moving into different species. And you know how important the livestock industry is to the state. And just to make sure that we are continuing to fund the diagnostic laboratories at Iowa State and USDA and things like that. So mainly just how are we going to continue to support the livestock industry and in research in this evolving disease place. Mother Nature always tries to stay ahead. So thanks.
Thank you, Troy. Representative Jones, if you take the question first.
Sure. So, yeah, I think on property taxes, we're still having those conversations. I don't think there's a silver bullet in what to do there, if anything. I have a couple of bills. I've talked to Chairman Kaufman, who chairs the Ways and Means Committee, about those ideas. We just kind of started those conversations in earnest together as a Ways and Means Committee this last week. I think that was that the first time we met? Yeah. So we did meet and kind of share some ideas, and so I think he's kind of collecting those ideas as to what we're hearing from people back home. But, and I said it before, my approach to this is not our pig, not our farm. We need to untangle some of the restrictions that we're putting on county and local governments, because I think that's problematic for them. I got a call on the way home on Thursday from a county official who has the potential to hire a really great employee. But unfortunately, she has worked in the county for 30 years, and she makes more than the elected county official. There is a law that says that deputies can only make, and this is not a law enforcement deputy, but the deputy of the elected official, they can only make 85% of the elected official's salary. Well, she already makes more because she's been a wonderful employee of the county for 30 years. And so she doesn't want to move into the new office and in a role that would be very helpful to the newly elected official, because she'd have to take a pay cut. And why we put these strings on it, I don't know. It's confusing to people. I don't know why the state has to engage in this. So I'm hoping that we can untangle some of that stuff. Counties need to do their business, cities need to do their business, and why we put these strings on it. We get so frustrated when the federal government puts these strings on things, and then we go ahead and do it to the county. So I would like to see us untangle and eliminate some code. Those code books are like, is there 7? Do we have 7 books now? I don't even think I could carry the Iowa code myself. And so at some point, we need to start taking words out of the code. This would be a great way to do that. When it comes to foreign animal disease and making sure that we're insulated as possible, we have the greatest resource in Iowa State University. And so we need to continue to fund the diagnostic lab and their efforts there. They have a world-class resource at Iowa State University, and they're pumping out veterinarians as fast as they can, making sure that they're qualified and competent, of course. But we are so very fortunate to have those folks with boots on the ground and so many great relationships between the university and our local veterinarians back home. So we're just going to have to continue to monitor some of those situations. I think we've got a coffee with Secretary Nag. Is that next week, maybe? Tuesday? Okay, so he's very gracious about inviting us into his office and talking about some of these issues. So I'll try to catch that meeting on Tuesday. But I will say, shout out to Senator Nag, because he's one of our own in Northwest Iowa. His family farm is just in Palo Alto County, so he's up here all the time. When his staff was scheduling him in September, they initially didn't have him like on the calendar for the World's Greatest County Fair, and he said, absolutely not am I going to miss the World's Greatest County Fair. And so he definitely has us in his heart and in his mind, and he makes sure to pay attention to Clay County in Northwest Iowa. So I'm very proud that we have that relationship in him, and we're pretty spoiled up here because prior to him we had Bill Northey, of course, from Dickinson County. So we have a great relationship with the Department of Agriculture. So we'll have to continue to monitor those situations, but we have the right people in the right places.
Thank you. Representative Wills.
Yeah, thanks for the question. As far as property tax, I will say this, just like I said before, if Spencer wants to have gold-plated bricks, the state has no business telling them you shouldn't have gold-plated bricks. So I favor not the approach of telling the communities what to do with their property tax. I favor the approach of, and this is what I've communicated to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, is I favor the approach of simplifying the process, making sure that you are able to understand how property taxes work, because part of the problem, quite frankly, right now is that it is so complicated. It takes almost a doctoral degreed person to be able to understand how property taxes work. So we need to look at that and make it simple. We need to simplify that. I think several comments at the meeting the other day were, we need to make it so simple a third grader can understand. And so that's one of the things we're going to try to do, because I think that property taxes with the rollbacks here and it's just so complicated, all the things that happen with your property taxes. So no wonder people are like, our property taxes are crazy, they're out of control. I don't even understand them, and I work in the Ways and Means Committee and have done so for a number of years. So we need to simplify, make it easier for you to understand, make it easier for you to know where your tax dollars are going at that local community or that local school or whatever the tax entity is. As for foreign animal disease, gosh, that's got to be a priority for us. And the Iowa State Veterinary and Diagnostic Lab is one of the greatest resources that the state of Iowa has. We've made tremendous investment in that lab over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, and added and built a new lab for them. I don't know how many of you know, but the Iowa Veterinarians Diagnostic Lab not only did animal diseases, but they were very key in COVID. When COVID happened in 2020, they actually were one of the key organizations in the nation that helped us figure that out. So they're a very key resource. We'll continue that investment in that diagnostic lab. The Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Nag, I think he's asking for $2 million this year for foreign animal. I anticipate that will have no problem, that we're going to give him those dollars for foreign animal disease control, mitigation, identification, because I will tell you, you all hear about the avian influenza, where they have to just kill entire barns of birds. Now imagine African swine fever coming into the state, and now we have to do that with hogs. We have to kill whole barnfuls of hogs because they've got this disease. Now, chickens, you can cycle those through fairly fast. 4 times a year, you can cycle a barn of chickens. It takes you can only cycle 2 times a year that same barn with hogs. And so recovering from that, now you've all noticed the egg prices are almost triple this year because of avian influenza, primarily because of all the chickens that had to be put down. Now imagine what pork's going to have if we have to start putting barn loads of hogs down because of the African swine flu or any others. There's a myriad of other foreign diseases that are coming. I don't mean to scare you, but it is an issue that we have to all be aware of and understand that we need to control these foreign diseases and make sure, quite honestly, it's not a matter of if we're going to get those diseases, it's when we're going to get those diseases, and so we need to be as prepared as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Evans.
I spent some time last week with Senator Cranebrink. He's head of appropriations, and our majority leader, Jack Whitfer, this last week going through the governor's budget. And there was an additional appropriation increase for the diagnostic lab and research center at Iowa State. So as Representative Wills mentioned, I don't think there's going to be a problem with getting additional funding for those programs. Property taxes. The question is always asked, why does the state government put their finger in that? It's been mentioned, is it really our responsibility? I'm going to argue the other side of this. It is our responsibility. And it is our responsibility because cities and counties, they have no direct effect on what's in Iowa code. They can only operate under what we allow in Iowa code or what's placed in Iowa code. Our responsibility as a legislature is what's in Iowa code. So removing language in Iowa code to simplify property tax and how our property tax system works is a great idea. But cities and counties and school districts who are funded by property taxes, they have no control over that. So it is our responsibility to work on that, and we need to be very judicious about moving forward in that work so that we simplify a system that's more effective for the property taxpayers, reduces their burden, without removing resources and available resources for, services that everyone is expecting to be provided at the city and county and school district level. And just a side note, I'm a Farm Bureau member. Jones is probably are as well. So I go up to the lobbyist for Farm Bureau, second day of session, and I say, I'm a Farm Bureau member and I need to talk to you. So start out a little humorous. I say, I'm dropping 3 bills that you're going to have to be opposed to. And all of them have to do with flood mitigation stuff and how they affect property taxes. He looked over the bill. He says, I agree 100% with what you're doing, but you're right. We're going to have to register opposed to it. So I went right to him and said, these are things that we need locally. I think they're good for not only our communities, it's also good for our farmers, because if we can in the future mitigate some of these floodings, how much ag land was underwater? It took on additional silt from rivers and streams, and what's the effect of productivity over time on that? I think it's a benefit to the farming community that we look at some of these things, even though in the short term it might look like it's a increase or property tax increase, or giving county supervisors some control that maybe some are uncomfortable with. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question, I would invite Megan Sloan to the microphone. She has a question regarding eminent domain.
Good morning. Thank you for being here and for taking our questions. It means a lot. I have a question about the possibility of getting a bill finally passed into the governor's desk this year to put some guardrails on the use of eminent domain. Obviously, this flows out of the proposed CO2 pipelines and the concerns that some landowners, including myself, have that they might be forced to have this project on their land, even though they are opposed to it because of the use of eminent domain. There are a lot of us who strongly feel that this is a private project for private gain, and we shouldn't have to give up our farmland for this project that we are opposed to. We've been working on different pieces of legislation. I think this is our 4th year. We had some success the last 2 years in the House, and then our bills always seem to go to the Senate and kind of die in the Commerce Committee. So I guess I'm wondering if you feel there's any chance of getting something done. We're just basically looking for some guardrails as far as the use of eminent domain. And I like what you're saying about kind of untying the hands of some of the counties and the Board of Supervisors. A lot of us landowners have been working hand in hand with our County Board of Supervisors in trying to get some guardrails placed on these pipelines, just basic things like setbacks, so they're not close to schools and hospitals and nursing homes. It has been a completely mixed bag. Some supervisors welcome us, have worked with us hand in hand, and put some basic setbacks in place. Others will not listen to us and have done absolutely nothing to help us. And so I think that arises from this confusion of, is that kind of in their wheelhouse? But I think as far as eminent domain, we would all welcome, the counties, the landowners, some guidance from the legislature as far as what can be done and what not can be done by these private companies to do their project. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Representative Wills, I'm going to have you start.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have in the House, we've passed a bill 2 years ago. Then last year we passed a bill. It goes over to the Senate, and it doesn't go any further than that. I would anticipate we're going to try to do something again, although things have changed a little bit as the IUB, now IUC, Iowa Utilities Commission, I think is what it's called now, has already granted eminent domain. And Representative Jones can say best, but I believe if we do something this year along the same lines that we did the last 2 years, we will be sued if it passes and the governor signs it. By the company, because they've been given legal authority to do this by a legal body. That doesn't mean we're going to not do it. It just means that we have to be aware that that may happen, that the state of Iowa may be sued. But what we are going to do, I think maybe this is what you're asking, we are going to look at the IUC, the authorities that it has. We're going to look at in the House, I don't know how the Senate will, and I think the Senate will be good with this too. But we are going to look at how things can be done in the future with projects like this. We're going to identify what is a utility. We're going to identify, so we're going to look at the whole system, maybe even expand the IUC from its 3-member group right now that are appointed by the governor and make it, I'm just going to throw 5-member board, 3 can be appointed by the governor, 2 appointed by the Senate, or some other mechanism. Or maybe somebody asked me, what about if we'd have them be elected officials? Something I hadn't thought about, but that's got to be something that we have to think about as well. So we need to look at that IUC and the authority that it has for the future, for sure, because I worry about this kind of project in the future and wonder what we can do as a legislative body to make some serious guardrails, like you said, in the future. And if we can do something currently, I think we're going to look at that as well. But it just made it a little bit more difficult once the IUC has granted that eminent domain authority to that private company. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Evans.
We have been having more conversations about this topic in the Senate than we have in the past. I don't think it's any secret from a lot of the people in the room that I've signed on or co-sponsored a few bills in the past directly addressing eminent domain. I'm not in agreement with what the IUC ruled earlier this year. I think eminent domain should be very narrowly and very targetedly used. What they ruled earlier this year, in my mind, actually reinforces the Kelo decision that came out of Connecticut, where basically a private entity can use eminent domain. And there's other examples that have also been around that have probably reaffirmed that decision as well. I state that decision was unconstitutional, that it should only be for public projects. So I fear the long-term repercussions of IUC's actions recently. Will there be some discussion? I guarantee there'll be discussion whether we can get some good legislation across the line. I'm not sure. How's that? But I continue to stand in this case, in support of the landowners. I try to remove the whole issue of the CO2 pipeline. I think that's a completely separate issue from this. I think we need to be focusing on the use of eminent domain specifically, and moving forward how that's going to impact landowners. And I also am very concerned about what I call an overreach, where we're actually ignoring ordinances, setbacks that have been put in place by local governments, but we're completely ignoring those or not honoring them. And that refers to this project in particular, but could very easily refer to other projects moving forward. So we need to protect the authority of those local governments in making those decisions, and we need to help protect the landowners and ensuring that eminent domain is only used for public projects that are directly for the public good. So, thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Jones.
Thank you for the question, Megan. I appreciate it. And I'm going to preface this with a pretty boring conversation about House rules. So House Rule 76, and I'll just read it. I pulled it up here. No member shall vote on any question in which a member or the member's immediate family member, as defined in Chapter 68B of the Iowa Code, has a direct financial interest different than any other similarly situated persons or classes of persons of the general public. So when it comes to specifically targeting the CO2 pipelines, I am married to a farmer. And we farm several parcels in which, I think we're up to 6 now, that these proposed pipelines are going to go through. Whether they happen or not, we will be financially impacted. So I have taken the high road and said, I will not be voting on a bill that impacts the current pipeline because House Rule 76. So I am out. I am conflicted out pursuant to House rules. And I know that gets a little ugly, but I can tell you that I have had many people come to me and say, we need more members that are willing to do that because we have conflicts happening all over the place. But for some reason, people feel impassioned to vote on them or don't have the guts to say, I'm not going to create that appearance of impropriety. So if the bill has to do with the current pipeline, I have to Rule 76 myself out of it. So that means I'm not voting for it, I'm not voting against it, I'm just out. And that's going to happen, and that has happened on a number of occasions for a number of different reasons. But the rules are in place for a reason, because we don't want legislators to be taking sweetheart deals, under the table deals, dirty deals from lobbyists or public or corporations or whatnot. Those rules exist for a reason, and that is specifically for reasons like this. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have opinions here. So going forward, my comments will be made on bills going forward that do not impact the current pipeline proposals. The other members are 100% accurate in that we need to define a public utility. And John, I think you used the phrase earlier that the time to plant a tree is today. And that's exactly it. We should have defined a public utility when we were talking about Rock Island Clean Line. But for some reason, like the Rock Island Clean Line project failed, and then we just stopped talking about it because people weren't fired up anymore. And so we need to continue to have that conversation, and we need to take a good, strong look at what it means to be a public utility. Senator Evans and Representative Wills, I think you mentioned it too, deregulating the IUC. They've got a lot of power over there, and I'm not sure what all happens there. So I don't think every issue that comes to the IUC should be legislated. I don't think the legislature has the ability or the knowledge to take a deep dive into some pretty difficult infrastructure issues. So they have a purpose, they have a place, but some of these things we need some oversight over. And I also just wanted to say, I appreciate that you are active and engaged in local meetings, because what we hear, let's talk about property taxes again. What we hear from local government is that, well, nobody's complaining to us. They just come straight to the legislature. And so I appreciate that you and your team, your delegation, are talking with your local supervisors and your local officials, because that's just as important. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Our next question, I would invite Chris Carr to the microphone regarding a question of civil and human rights.
Again, thank you for all being here. The issue that I have to bring isn't on your top three, so I apologize for that. So I am a mental health therapist, and part of what I do, I get to work with trans folks. So, a second. Excuse me. So people who are transitioning from one sex to another sex is oftentimes thought of as oh, I just need to change things up, like changing your tie or changing your suit or something like that. But since the dawn of biology and other like sciences, we've known that there's been anomalies with sexes. Sometimes people are born with both male and female parts. Sometimes chromosomes are different. Sometimes hormones are different. So the simple question I have, excuse me, a little under the weather today. The simple question I have, in light of the governor's apparent attempts to take away civil and human rights from trans folks, and our nation's kind of dark history of, labeling people 3/5 of a person or something like that. My specific question, and I'll wait up here till I have an answer, is what percentage of a human are trans people?
Okay. Thank you for your question. With that, Senator Evans, I'm going to have you start.
Trans people are 100% human.
Thank you.
Okay. And Representative Jones.
Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight.
And the percentage?
100.
Thank you.
And Representative Wells.
So our Constitution guarantees every human is equal under our Constitution, and so every person is 100% human.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for your question. Okay. Our next question was submitted via email, and I know that these are always very popular topics. And talk about what Iowa needs to do and continue to do or improve upon to ensure that we are a business-friendly state. And with that, I will go to Representative Jones.
Oh boy, you didn't give me much time to think about that, and that was a really big question. Well, so let's start with deregulation. So the governor, 2 years ago, January, rolled out the red tape review. And the red tape review is an effort to reduce regulations and laws on the public. It is a massive 3-year project. And then the legislature intervened and added a 5-year project on top of, so there's a 3-year red tape review. There's always been a 5-year rolling review that nobody seems to acknowledge, but it still happens in the Rules Committee. And then there is, I think now, a 4-year review of boards and commissions and a 5-year rolling red tape review. All of that said, what all these things are working towards is reducing regulations. So that means reducing regulations on businesses, on what it takes to submit your taxes, the Department of Revenue, also on licensure. That's a really big issue. We were one of the highest licensed states in the nation. It's really hard to undo a license once you have created one. And I'll just talk about in lawyer land, right? Like, there's a lot of discussions about whether lawyers should have to go to law school, whether they should have to take the bar exam. In California, you don't have to go to law school. I think in Wisconsin, you don't have to take the bar exam. But in Iowa, you gotta do both. And if you take away one of those requirements, you're gonna have a lot of really honked off lawyers who went through the bar exam and went through law school all for naught, right? So it's hard. It's hard to tackle licensure, but I think some of that is happening. I think we are seeing good things come out of the red tape review and the rolling reviews thereafter. And associations and businesses and advocacy groups are more than welcome to participate in that process, and often they are engaged by the government themselves to find out what we can be doing to be a better business climate. That's probably the biggest thing. There is a lot of discussion about, how do I say this? There's a lot of discussion about kind of the business-friendly vibe coming out of Iowa, right? So I think the governor is really taking a good look at that. And in her condition of the state address, she said she was going to Illinois, and we cheered her. That was kind of a funny quip that she made in that speech. But her point is well taken. We need to go to Illinois and start picking off their businesses, because Illinois is a dreadful state to do business, and we need to make sure that they know that their people and their businesses are welcome here. And we've been doing that in Minnesota for a long time, even before Senator Boozlow's bill to take the bottom 9 counties and bring them back into Iowa. And I know that was kind of a funny bill, but his point is well taken, right? Like, come to Iowa. You are welcome to do business here. We are tax friendly. We have good schools. We have small towns that are welcoming and accommodating, and we want you to do your business here. So, and just as a little history, so there was a bill in the Minnesota legislature that was pretty ugly to businesses, and there was an article in the Star Tribune. This was years and years ago. This was probably 2014. And there was a business owner that was lamenting about how he was going to have to move his businesses. And so I forwarded that email to Debbie Durham, Director of Economic Development, and I said, hey, I think you need to call this guy because he's kind of in a pickle. They're doing some awful things to him in Minnesota. You should bring him here. And she said, oh, Megan, we were in the gallery watching the Minnesota legislature pass that bill so that we could start talking to the other people in the gallery and encouraging them to move to Iowa. So they are doing great things at economic development. They are on top of it. They are ready to start picking people off. But I think that creates a sentiment that Iowa is ready to do business, and we're going to come after your good businesses. We're going to bring them here.
Thank you. And Representative Wills.
Thanks for the question. So all kinds of things we're doing in the state of Iowa to make Iowa a business-friendly state. Representative Jones talked a lot about them already. But one of the things that we're doing that really doesn't get a lot of press, but we're entering compacts throughout the nation. So other states that join these compacts would basically allow people to move to the state of Iowa or move to one of those other states and not have to get relicensed in Iowa. If they are part of that state and are licensed in that state and they move to Iowa, they're considered licensed in the state of Iowa. Reducing taxes, both corporate and individual taxes, is making Iowa a business-friendly state. Representative Jones just mentioned Debbie Durham. She's just had an article in the Des Moines Register yesterday, I think it was yesterday, talking about how we need to reduce the amount of tax credits that she has available to her because Iowa is now more competitive for businesses to come to. And so that's, I think, an important statement. She's saying we have made Iowa such a competitive state that she doesn't need as many tools as she's had in the past. So she's willing to give up some of her tax credits that she has available, which we can then turn back to you in the form of tax cuts or do something else with them. Regulation. We're reducing regulation. Like I said earlier, we've been doing DOGE before DOGE was cool. And so I was at a conference this summer where Iowa was pointed out as being a leader in reducing regulation, cutting red tape. So that was, coming from Iowa, it was an eye-opener for me to hear that we're a leader in cutting red tape. Even amongst those states like Virginia, who's nationally known for cutting red tape and having programs for cutting red tape, we're doing it without a program. The governor is doing that. The legislature has directed some of that. I think our workforce is one thing we need to really improve on. We need to start attracting and drawing people into the state. In order to do that, we're going to have housing. We're going to have local, what I like to say is public-private partnerships. So maybe, like the city of Spencer, partnering with a developer to build workforce housing that people can afford. It doesn't always necessarily have to be affordable. Low-cost housing, because people that are in low-cost housing are willing to buy a more expensive house as they can afford it, opening up the lower-cost houses. We just need housing in general. Some people want to stay in an apartment, or some people want to, so we need to have more of that, especially here in the rural parts of the state. Reciprocity, very similar to compacts, but a lot of our licensed folks should have the ability to move into our state, and as long as we have reciprocity with another state, let's make it easier for them. Daycare, I think that's another thing that we need to really look at and concentrate on. And again, I've seen some terrific public-private partnerships in Lyon County and in several other places where they're able to have a nice public-private partnership and have a good daycare system with hundreds of kids. George, Iowa, over in Lyon County is a terrific example. Small community, two big, huge manufacturing plants that draw people from all over within 60 miles of George. They have a daycare facility that can hold, I think, about 200 kids. Well, because these parents are dropping the kids off at that daycare and then going to work at those manufacturing plants. Tremendous, and the community has invested. the daycare is in part of the school that is not being used, and so we're having public-private partnerships there, and it's making it work for everybody. And so those are the kind of things that we need to do. We need to attract workers. Daycare is going to be one of those things. So those are some things that we both either have or we need to work on harder and do more of in order to become a better business-friendly state. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills and Senator Evans.
I would say our representatives didn't leave much on the table for me to talk about. At one time, the state of Iowa had the highest corporate tax rate in the nation. And I think we fall about 24th now. Is that about where we're at? So we've literally cut that in half over the last 3 years. That's big. Improving the tax climate for businesses to locate to our state is very attractive. I had a conversation with Debbie Durham when she was in Cherokee touring the city after the flood, but took the opportunity to talk economic development with her because I think there's opportunity in crisis sometimes. And she had already been thinking down these lines of more targeted tax incentives, especially for rural Iowa-friendly businesses. And I was very encouraged by that. You've heard the announcement recently that that's the direction that Iowa Economic Development is going to move. So that's good things. All these things take a little time. You're never going to get an immediate return on this. So over the next few years, I think they're going to have a big impact. Fees and license, especially for your small business, that was mentioned. But when we're talking small business, I'm talking these mom and pop shops that maybe have 2-3 employees. They're paying the same fees as what I would call a larger small business. We need to be able to delineate that, so we're encouraging entrepreneurship, that the cost for entering into startup businesses is less. In my former work life, I was very active in rural economic development because it impacted school districts. And what I learned in different conferences that I attended on the subject was that you're always better off attracting 10 small businesses that employ 10 or 20 people than you are attracting one large business that employs 200, because if you lose that one, it has a major impact on your local economy. But if you lose one or two of those 10, 20-person small businesses, it has less impact on your local economy. It's also easier to sustain those smaller businesses. So I think it's very important that we look at helping those entrepreneurs, lowering those fees and costs of licensure moving forward, and encouraging people to become startups. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question, I would invite Bob Wittenberg to the podium. He has a question regarding K-12 state funding.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for volunteering to be our representatives in our own self-governance. It's a very important role, and we appreciate that. And I know it's not easy. So my priority is K-12 education, because I'm a father of 2 13-year-olds. As a businessman, I want qualified employees. As a community member, I want responsible, kind, caring, contributing community members to build the community with. The number of 2% has been mentioned. For Spencer School District, that's about $50,000 of new money, a little bit more than that. At least in the preliminary budget estimates, makes it difficult to give everybody an inflation raise with that kind of money. I think Iowa, over the last 15 years, according to the Iowa Legislative Service Bureau, the personal income has grown at 40%, and the school expenditures have grown at about 20%. So we're falling behind. We're 35th in the country in per pupil expenditures on the average. So it'd take 15% increase just to get us to the national average. I know that you were kind enough to come to the Spencer School Board and share your priorities of making education #1 in the nation in Iowa, and I share that goal. And so I'd just like you to talk about how we can do that and how we can find the funds to do that. Education is a very employee, personnel-intensive business enterprise with highly educated people that we need to attract. And the marketplace is telling us that we're not attracting those people. We're not paying enough to attract them because we don't see the sufficient number of applicants to fill these highly trained jobs of being a teacher. So that's my question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Senator Evans, we're going to have you start.
Okay. The governor proposed 2% in her budget. As a former superintendent, I always knew what I needed to manage my budget, but more importantly, I wanted to know as soon as possible. And we have, in Iowa code right now, we have a time limit. So the clock is ticking on when we need to release that so schools can start, actually you should have been started working on your budget already, but so that you can solidify that budget. You have budget hearings coming up. The thing is, we almost always miss that deadline. So my goal this year is to hit that 30-day limit. So I know negotiations have already started between the two chambers. I anticipate, I know, unless something happens to throw a roadblock in the way, that the Senate will be revealing what they're going to support moving forward. Now, I know the Senate always comes in a little low, the House always comes in a little high. So the Senate, I'm sure the House will be putting their bill out there here real soon too, and then the real negotiations begin. If I was a superintendent planning my budget, the governor announced 2%. Generally, it falls somewhere around there. So I would be, actually, I would set my budget at 0 and then plan for 2% is what I would be doing. Now, last year, we raised minimum teacher salaries to $47,500, I believe it was, with this year going to $50,000. That puts us 5th in the nation for starting teacher salaries. We have put a considerable amount of resources into education, and I think I'm going to leave for Representative Wells because I think he had all these statistics put together at one time. So I don't want to steal his thunder. But I think we're going to become a more attractive state for educators. Representative Jones and I have worked very hard on making it, I don't want to say easier, but that there are more pathways for becoming a teacher if you want to come out of another career, another field, that you now have multiple pathways to earn that certification. I think that's going to be also something that's going to help our workforce in education moving forward. I don't discount that 3% would be a much better number than 2%. 2% puts more schools on what's called the budget guarantee. You heard me talk about that before. So that does have a direct impact on local property taxes whenever you put a school on the budget guarantee. They don't have to levy back for that. Generally they do because they have the authority to. So I think that needs to be in consideration as well as we negotiate between the two chambers. But if I was a betting man, I would say it's going to fall somewhere around that 2% increase. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you, Bob, for bringing the question and for your kind words. So I want to step back a little bit and talk about generally the economy. And we are a part of a lot of conversations with a lot of people, right? So I always say that the turtle growers and the funeral directors all have issues in the legislature, right? But what we are continually hearing from any business, any employer that we run into is that they have a workforce shortage, that they need more people. And so you're not alone in that fight. And, oftentimes they say, well, let's figure out a way to give them better benefits or give them an easier path to licensure or pay them more money. We simply just don't have enough people here. We need more people here to accommodate all of the tasks that we need done and all the things that we want in our communities. So I hear we've had openings. I want to say the last time I looked for a court reporter, I think we had 10 shortages across the state to the point where now we've kind of created a new kind of administrative assistant role in the judicial branch because we just don't have enough skilled people that are court reporters. The people with the little machine on taking all the notes. But I think we often forget that there are so many jobs that need filled in our communities you're not alone in that fight, and I think that's the bigger issue here is that we need more people. But yeah, when it comes to education funding, I think there's a lot of us that would like to see a higher number than 2. But the question is are we going to wait to the end of session to duke it out, right? So we can have that fight, we can wage that war, but at what point do we become more harmful than helpful in not getting you that number at the right time, right? So there are other ways to fund education outside of supplemental state aid. So I guess the vibe I'm kind of getting is that we need to set SSA, get it done in the 30 days, and then we can talk about, supplementing education with, the para increase that we did last year, doing things like that. Again, I would love to help Spencer. We've obviously been through a lot, and we had damage to 2 elementary schools. So I kind of wonder if we're at that point where we should quickly find that agreement and then move on and talk about supplemental state aid.
Thank you, Representative, and Representative Wills.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So actually, in the House, sometimes the Senate accuses the House of talking too much amongst ourselves, and we do. We talk quite a bit. We've got 67 members, and everybody wants to be heard. So Thursday, we actually spent over an hour, I think, talking about state supplemental aid between all the House members that were present. And so we had a really good discussion. I don't know where things are going to end up. I don't have a crystal ball. But when I think the overall feeling, Representative Jones would probably agree with me that the overall feeling was people wanted more than 2%, but understanding that the Senate's not probably going to move more than 2%, and the governor wants 2%. So we are looking at maybe some other options. Last year we gave, $60 million for an additional teacher salary uptick, and $14 million specifically for paraeducators. We're going to continue that $14 million for paraeducators. We're going to finish the uptick for teachers, beginning teachers, to get $50,000 a year as a starting wage, and 12-year teachers to get $62,500, I believe. So that's going to be where we're at this year. Last year, I think we always talk about percentages. Last year, we gave 2.5% state supplemental aid, but when you factor all the dollars that we gave last year, it was like 4.8% combined. I hate talking about percent. Let's talk about the dollars that we're giving. With 2% is about $60 million of new money. And so that's important, $60 million of new money. Now, K through 12 education takes right at 50% of our state budget. About $3.4 billion goes to K through 12 education. And so that's a huge part of our budget. It controls the budget. And so state supplemental aid really has to be done first. I've had superintendents tell me, more than not, tell me, I don't care what the state supplemental aid is, just get it to me as soon as you can. And so that's the House's goal, is to meet that 30-day deadline or beat it. And so I would suspect that probably as early as next week, we will have a bill come out and go through the subcommittee process and the committee process, getting ready, because we're already 3 weeks into this, or starting next week will be our 3rd week. And we have to have that done 30 days after the governor's address. And so we've got, a week and a half, 2 weeks? 2 weeks. 2 weeks before we have to have state supplemental aid. And in order for us to get it done, just to get out of subcommittee and committee, it takes almost a week. So next week, we're going to have state supplemental aid started, coming through the subcommittee process. We will do that, I believe, but we're going to look at other things. There's a transportation cost differential throughout the state. Some schools have, like over in Lyon County, Ruthven has a transportation cost more than, say, Spencer has. And so we're going to equalize some of those transportation costs. And, when we look at some of the things that we want to do that will supplement state supplemental aid, I think we've got some good things that will really help schools, especially when they have deficits or when the budget really doesn't account for certain things. And so I think we're going to look at some things like that as well.
Great, thank you, Representative. Well, the time has come for our closing comments that each legislature has an opportunity to provide. And actually, Representative Wills, I'm going to go ahead and have you start.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. Nice, bright, sunny day for you to be out and about. By the way, Winter Games, we haven't talked about that, but it is Winter Games weekend this weekend. So if you happen to want to have the most fun you've ever had on the ice, come up to the Iowa Great Lakes and have some fun. Just be careful where you're going because we've already had a few vehicles go through the ice. So we want to be having fun, but yet safe times up at Iowa Great Lakes. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate all your thoughts and passions, and really looking forward to the rest of this session. Look forward to next time when we're back. We'll actually have some meat that we can talk about, some of the bills that are out, some of the bills that maybe didn't make it. So we're going to be able to talk a little bit more about what's actually happening next time we're here. February something. We'll announce that, I'm sure. But really looking forward to seeing you then because I think this is going to be a great legislative session. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to your future questions and thoughts. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And Senator Evans.
When we get back on Monday, I'm sure individual bills are dropping fast and furious now, getting out of LSA. Study bills and department bills always take priority, so those tend to come out earlier rather than later. The governor's bills should all be coming out here. I know yesterday she made the announcement on the cell phone bill. I'm anticipating the other priority bills out of the executive branch will be coming out this week. So getting subcommittee assignments, getting that process started, that's your opportunity for input. Even if you can't get down to Des Moines, you can attend each one of those, any of the subcommittees, all of them if you like, via Zoom, and you can participate, and you'll get called on. You can enter your input in every subcommittee without having to drive all the way to Des Moines. So I encourage you to take advantage of that as the process begins because it's going to be fast and furious the next couple of weeks with subcommittees and then committee work. And during the committee, if you wait till the committee, the public doesn't get to speak. Your public input time is during subcommittee. So I think that's important to delineate. And I'm looking forward to that work. A lot of good discussions have already been held about moving Iowa forward, making a much more attractive place to live, work, and raise a family. And I'm eager to dig in the work. And I really take it as an honor to represent District 3. And thank you for entrusting me with that work. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. And Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa. It looks like I've got 7 minutes, and I know you guys like to keep it at 90 minutes. So, but I don't know if I can talk that long. So, my colleagues have wrapped up nicely, and I do appreciate being able to work with this team and Senator Rowley included. Clay County is so very fortunate in the way that we ended in redistricting because we ended up with 4 members in the Iowa legislature. So because Clay County was bifurcated essentially by the redistricting maps, now I represent the bottom 3/4 of Clay County and John Wills has the top quarter of Clay County. And then John Wills' the Senate district that he is in goes over to Winnebago County with Representative Rowley, and then Senator Evans and I have the rest of Clay County. So that worked out very well for Clay County because now we have 4 people advocating for Clay County in the legislature. And I know that I can always rely on these folks to have Clay County's back. And at this point, we need that more than ever, right? When we're talking about flood recovery, we need as many people paying attention as possible. So it's easier to wage a war when you have a team. And so we're gonna work together in Des Moines. And it's an absolute honor to be on this team and to have your trust in moving our issues forward from Northwest Iowa. I understand that this time in the legislative session can be a little scary. Fortunately and unfortunately, every member of the legislature can introduce any bill that they want. And sometimes those issues aren't always thought through. And other times, they know that it's a bad idea, but they have a constituent back home who is absolutely hell-bent on having a bill in the legislature on their issue. And so they put it out there for them to see and to experience and to understand and to give it a fair shot. But I understand that sometimes these bills roll out and seem pretty ugly from the outset. And so please be in communication with us. If you have any concerns on any bill, let us know. And we can try to do some investigating. Actually, I heard about a bill yesterday, and so I immediately picked up the phone and called the lobbyist, and I said, what are you doing here? And he's like, we had nothing to do with this. This was introduced by a member on behalf of a constituent. We had nothing to do with this, but I'll give you the backstory. And it came from a very genuine, this person was just trying to help, but didn't quite understand all the dynamics at play. And the member was just trying to help their constituent and did him a solid in introducing this legislation. And hung up the phone, and he sent me a picture. He's like, he was in Florida deep sea fishing, and they caught this huge marlin while I was on the phone with him. So I just say that because we have access to the people who can give the backstories of this stuff, and they are ready and willing to provide that information, even if they are deep sea fishing off the coast of Florida. So we can help figure out where these bills come from to hopefully calm some of that temperature when you see some of this perhaps ugly stuff come out. That all said, all of the legislation that we introduced and that we put our names on, they all can be found on the legislative website. Check them out, and feel free to ask us questions. I know some of those bills are coming from people in this room, and someone told me the other day that I introduced boring bills, and I'm glad that my bills might be seen as boring, because that means that we're just untangling little things. But I'm not really there to start fires or to throw bombshells out there. I'm here to do the work of my constituents. And so you can see where those bills are going. If you have any concerns about those, again, please reach out. Happy to have those conversations with you. And if they impact you, or if you're just interested, just feel free to shoot me an email, send me a text, give me a phone call. Happy to have conversations anytime. And with that, I think I know I'm still about 3 minutes short. But I do appreciate you all being here. I appreciate the opportunity to be a member of this team and to be working on these issues at such a critical time, especially for Spencer. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. I will be able to manage to fill up this remaining time. We're all good. So on behalf of the Spencer Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, for being here and asking questions. Thank you so much to our legislators, not only for being here for today, but for all that you do when you're in session, for everything that you do for us throughout the year, especially this past 7 months that we've had, and especially for Clay County and for the Spencer area. I would like to mention just briefly, we've been able to celebrate many businesses opening, and today we do have another business that's having a grand reopening and ribbon cutting at Arnold Motor, and so I would like to mention that. And it's a wonderful business, and it's a business that has their corporate headquarters here in Spencer, and so we're fortunate to have a business that has such a spread across multiple states here in our community. So 11:30 to 1:30 is their open house and ribbon cutting at noon. Thank you again for giving of your time, especially on the weekend, and for making sure that we're able to stay current on information that's happening at the State House, and for welcoming all of us with warm and open arms when we do make it down to Des Moines. Thank you also to the Spencer Police Department, Spencer Radio Group, the Spencer Daily Reporter, Spencer Municipal Utilities, and MediaCom. As a reminder, our next Eggs and Issues session will be on Saturday, February 15th, right here in Spencer City Hall in the council chambers. Thank you again, and have a great weekend.